Okay. And then sometimes this is hard for people to notice the strengths and then to say them out loud to kind of almost compliment ourselves. But I'm curious, what is a strength of that type 1 energy that you notice in yourself that has allowed you to be successful?
Yeah, that was really fun. That's a fun question to ask too. Well, two pieces I've learned a lot about as being a business owner, how to sell sell my products. And so I think that has been really helpful because I'm very methodical and very clear and very logical. And so it's a very easy sell because I'm very organized and I lay it out very simply and logically. So that side of it, which is such a big part of a business. And then in the HR work, definitely like logical thinking and tough conversations and situations. I always say, okay, so here's next steps. 1, 2, 3. And everyone says, I just love that. Like prospects like it in the sales process because they know what's coming, because I like to tell them what's coming. And then in the HR situations with tough conversations and situations, I always say, okay, here's what's next. We're going to have this conversation with this person, or they're going to go off and do it. And then we regroup, and this is what it looks like, and all the dates. And so I think that, and I've been told, I had a recent prospect, and it was the biggest compliment. He said, before he decided what we were going to do for work, he said, just to be clear, he said, we're working together. We're just trying to figure out, because I offer a few other products besides the subscription. And he said, the level of organization and communication and polish, we're working with you. We just don't know in what capacity. And so I think that's a pretty big signal to the one.
Yes. Oh. What might you say to somebody who, I guess performance, maybe this could be something, but I'm just thinking of kind of like in Enneagram ways that tends to be like really domineering and maybe talks over people or tends to always need to be in charge. And then
Yes.
maybe a leader who isn't as, straightforward. How might they have a conversation like this? Because I could see that being kind of just, intimidating or something you would want to avoid.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great scenario. Maybe we'll call it like, I call them high performing jerks. They do a really
Okay.
good job. And so they're never going to get fired. Well, they should have things corrected with their performance, but they do so well in their job and they're just a
Great
jerk.
term.
They just run over people on the way,
Okay.
but maybe they make the company a lot of money. So someone like that. Yeah. So I always start with thanks for having this conversation, or thanks for taking. So with someone like that, I would kind of maybe like massage an ego a little bit and say, I know you are so busy. You have so much going on. Thank you so much for carving out time for me, even though you might be thinking they need to have a conversation. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
go at it thinking, okay, so maybe some empathy. They're busy, they're stressed. So that's the thanks step.
Okay.
And then, why you're there. I'd love to brainstorm with you some better ideas about, and I'm just kind of off the cuff. So
Yeah.
I'd love to sit down and brainstorm with you about some ideas about ways we can work with the team to communicate XYZ better. So you've noticed I'd love to talk with you to brainstorm, because someone like this, if you come out with the why, like, Joe, you're too abrasive. We need to talk about it. He's just going to get prickly. So, hey, Joe, I'd love to sit down and brainstorm some ways to have our communication be more effective with the team. And I can't remember the exact scenario you mentioned before. So something like that. And then you could say in the what, I've noticed, because it's also great if the person having the conversation, can say, I've noticed, because it's just an observation. It's not like you're a bad person, you're stupid, you're obnoxious. I've noticed. I've
Yeah.
noticed that Jane doesn't say anything in meetings because I think she thinks that she's not supposed to chime in based on some things I've heard you say, such as this. So it's like you're maybe quoting something you've heard. You could cite another example, and you could pause in there too with someone like this and say, what do you think?
Mm.
And so in the how, So we said the what, we gave an example. Jane doesn't feel like she can speak up. What do you think? Insert maybe a what do you think in there. And then in the how. So back to kind of why we're sitting down, let's brainstorm some ways that we may be able to bring the team into decisions more, or bring the team, get the team to speak up more in meetings and voice their opinions. What are your ideas? I'd love to brainstorm this with you a bit. Like, brainstorming is a very non-confrontational word. And I always say you could start in a format like this with this person. It may need to get more direct if he doesn't get the point. So that was the how. And then, again, you are so busy. You have so much going on. I just thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with me. Let's get together again and talk about some ideas that you come up with.
What about for those of us who worry about offending somebody? So, getting wrapped up in all the things and not keeping it simple. It's like, oh, you're great at this, or not being direct. I mean, what can you just help us out with for those of us
Yes.
who worry about that?
Yes, that's such a common question. More often than not, that's the typical way. People think of, what if this person gets offended? Really centering yourself before to think I'm not going into this as a confrontation. I'm a big fan of affirmations, even just saying everything's going to go fine. I'm going to say these things in a kind and direct manner. And really, in the end, if you relay it, if you package it up, don't say too much, get the message across in a simple, straightforward, and human-centered way, and they're still feeling hurt. Again, I hate to say, well, that's on them. If you do this in such a way that it is all these things, sometimes it really just is on them, and they might need a chance, like, say, the money borrower. They might just be upset because their punching bag is telling them to stop asking me for money. And so they might be hurt thinking you're not a friend. Who is that a reflection on, though? Really, it's a reflection on them. So I say, yes, we can't put, I heard an expression once and I love it. It says other people's disappointments isn't a reflection on us, or isn't our responsibility. That's it. Other people's disappointments are not our responsibility. So it's kind of the same thing. I always say if you offend or hurt them, you might have said something that was not professional, direct, and kind. It might have borderlined brutally honest. And maybe just remember the next time, watch the way things are relayed. But even if the reality is, you're probably thinking too, Sarah, is you might say it in all these, the formula with the three-prong approach, and the person does get super offended because they're very sensitive. I don't know what type that is, but they might be super sensitive. And, just using expressions like, thanks so much. I know this was hard to hear. And I always say, don't say sorry, because you're not sorry. You've got to have the conversation.
Yeah.
But I know this might have been hard to hear. And thanks for being here. I know you might need a minute. Thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me get this off my chest. Thanks for being willing.
Yeah, I really like all of that. And I know that we're talking about like a work context, but like you were saying, the money borrower
Yeah.
potentially, or just in your relationships and with boundaries. And it's like, yeah, why? And I'm guilty of this too, just like stewing in anger or annoyance and allowing it to continue happening because I don't want to say anything. And so like, just what a gift for any type of relationship to be able to have these kind of things and move through them, navigate through them.